All right, everybody, this is module, 3, in the Community Risk Reduction course, Identify and Develop Intervention Strategies. I've got my computer set up over here, so if I'm not looking at you, you'll know what I'm looking at over here. I just wanted to kind of lead this off a little bit. There's a lot of information in this particular module about planning your interventions, and an intervention is basically, we've identified a problem and a people. Maybe we, in our community risk assessment, we found that there's an unusual number of cooking fires among our senior adult population. And those individuals live in maybe an independent living complex in our town. That's just kind of an example. Yours may not have been quite that easy or quite that specific. Maybe you find that you're responding to a lot of calls that where older adults have fallen and need assistance getting up. Maybe you have a lot of fires that are being set by children in your community, or maybe it's car crashes or any other type of hazard. So we did that in the previous unit. So now we're going to kind of get to that point of we've set some goals of what we want to do about it, meaning we want to see a decrease in the number of these incidents, an increase in the knowledge of the people about what's happening, about the problem or how they can keep themselves safe. But ultimately, we want to see a decrease in something. So what is our goal? And we looked at some of those in the previous unit. Remember, they were SMART, and they were measurable and achievable and realistic and time sensitive. So in this unit, we begin to look at, so what are we going to do to reach our goal? How, a lot of you have said education, education, education. I'm a firm believer in education, obviously. I spent most of my career in the fire service doing fire and life safety education. And when I first started out, I thought, I'm the expert. I'm going to tell them what to do, and they're going to do it. But guess what? It didn't work that way. It wasn't quite that easy. While education, to me, is the foundation for many other interventions, it's as a standalone intervention, it's weak. And there has to be other interventions that go along with it. And when I say intervention, this is like, what can we do to stop or prevent or mitigate this injury, this risk from being so great or from happening at all? So this is where we're going to get into figuring out what exactly it is we can do. When we talk about education, who are we going to educate? If we have a problem with preschoolers that are setting fires, we can do some education with the preschoolers, but we also need to do some education with the parents. But what else can we do? What else can we do? So that's what this unit is about. There's some information that you're going to read in your the public fire education planning, the 5-step process, and about community partners for one. Who can we partner with? Remember that in any community, we have a fire problem. It's not just the fire department's problem, it's a community problem. It's almost a social issue. So who can we partner with to help us with this particular issue? If we look at our senior adults in cooking fires, or our senior adults in falls, there may be organizations that work with senior adults. Meals on Wheels might be a good example of one. Maybe we get Meals on Wheels involved. We don't have as many cooking fires. Meals on Wheels can also help us get into somebody's home so that we can look around and make environmental changes. So who can we partner with? That's going to be, and who within our organization can help us? That's another thing to look at. Who do we need to have on board in order to make this effective? And then when we think about prevention or mitigation, there's 3 different levels. And I did a little mini lecture on that, so I don't want to repeat. there's a lot of different ways to look at this. There's primary prevention, which prevents the incident from occurring. There's secondary intervention, which makes it not so bad. That's more of mitigation. And then there's tertiary intervention, which is the care and treatment or rehabilitation in the end. American Red Cross, insurance, those kinds of things. So, and there's a short video on that that will give you a little bit more information about the whole concept of primary, secondary, and tertiary. There is also, I believe, in that video as well, a discussion about something called the 5 E's of prevention. And I had listed some information there. It seems that it has gone away. And so I am going to replace it with some new information, hopefully. But when we think about interventions, we can do education. We can do engineering. A smoke alarm is an engineering piece. Fire sprinklers, engineering. Enforcement. Think about wearing your seatbelt and that you can get a ticket. That's the enforcement piece. Fire code inspections, fire inspections of buildings to make sure that they meet the code and that they are abiding by the regulations of the code. Economic incentives. This can be an incentive or a disincentive. It may be some kind of financial or some kind of a discount, maybe on your property taxes if you have a residential sprinkler. Or maybe, again, it goes back to that seatbelt. You're not wearing your seatbelt, you can get a ticket. And it can hurt your pocketbook. So those are some economic issues or incentives, disincentives. And then lastly is our emergency response, making sure that we in the services are prepared for the incidents for which we may respond to. If you have a lake in your community, do you do water rescue training? Maybe it's station location, maybe it's equipment that's needed. Do you have a ladder apparatus that's going to reach the highest floor? Have you done drills? Those kinds of things to make sure that we have the most adequate emergency response. So there's all different kinds of interventions that we can look at. There's something called, again, there's another video on here, and I hope I'm not conflicting, but I know this is kind of it's a thinking issue for a lot of people. Haddon's matrix, Haddon, is something that comes to us from public health. Mr. Haddon came up with this matrix, and you'll see, again, examples of it on the course site, where we talked about pre-event, event, and post-event interventions. What can we do before, what can we do during, and what can we do after? So this kind of parallels with our primary, secondary, and tertiary types of interventions. And then there's other perspectives such as the host. What are the human factors involved in this? What are maybe the physical environment or the social environment of all of this? And he looked at it in terms of vehicle crashes. But we can apply that to other types of injury and fire issues in the community. There's another example on the course site that will show you for dog bites. That might be an issue that you can look at of pre-event, event, and post-event. And then the host or the human behaviors, the agent, the dog behaviors, the physical environment, using fences, the social environment, leash laws passed, stray dog ordinances, those kinds of things. So that is one example. And what I have asked you to do is to create that for your particular issue in your community, to look at that. There's a blank Haddon's matrix that you can download that gives you those factors. And think about that. Well, let's go back to give you an example. We'll go back to our older adults let's say, the cooking fire with older adults. So one thing that can be done is we can educate. Don't leave the kitchen when cooking. You know, take something with you if you do. That's more like secondary. But maybe don't leave the kitchen when cooking. And then we can also maybe install these quick release extinguishers under the stove. That's an engineering piece. There's something called the Range Queen, and there's another one. I can't recall the name of it right now. Maybe if these people are living in assisted living, that if they have a fire, they get booted down to, I mean, if they're living in independent living, they get booted down to assisted living. Older adults don't want that. Most of them want to be independent. So if I have a fire, that's the enforcement piece. You're going to have to leave independent living. You can't stay there anymore. Emergency response, making sure that firefighters and others have done pre-fire planning, walkthrough at our independent living facility. And then economic incentive, I'm trying to come up with something here. And that may be kind of the booted down to assisted living, may be an economic incentive. You know, and especially when you're talking about older adults, it's not necessarily economic, but they have lots of possessions and they'll be lost if they have a fire, and they don't want that. So we're looking at ways that we can impact this issue in our community. I was trying to think of some more ways. Maybe we do volunteer Meals on Wheels, and that way the economic incentive is they don't have to buy groceries. They just eat Meals on Wheels food. I don't know. Sometimes our interventions that we come up with are kind of outside the box, and that's okay, because every good invention was originally outside the box, you know, when you think about it. But this is what we're looking for. And this is why, again, why we partner with people. I cannot tell someone, say from another culture, not to burn candles. And I think I've used this example before. I need someone from that culture to help me convey that message that they need to do so carefully, safely, and if possible, don't do it at all. We need partners that can actually get into the homes. Many times as solely a fire service responder, we don't get into the homes until it's too late, unless we're doing some kind of home inspection program, which is a great intervention for most types of issues that occur in the home. So partnerships are just invaluable when it comes to this, as well as really sitting down. One of the steps that you can go through is it's called define the root cause. And it's kind of like asking, like your 4-year-old kid asks the question, but why? And you have this we had a fire in the kitchen, but why? And when you really narrow down, you're drilling down to the real root cause of why fires are occurring. Maybe kids are setting fires because they don't have any childcare in that community. And maybe we can work with social services to get them some childcare. Solves that problem, solves our problem anyway. So asking that but why question is very important to drill down to get to the real root cause. And that's when we know how we can design our interventions. Another method that you can use is to if you list out the steps, what happened? We wake up in the morning. Grandma wants to fry bacon. She puts that on the stove. Write down all the steps, and then you take in between each of those steps. Where can we intervene? Where can we provide an intervention? Whether or not it's going to be accepted or not is a different story. We kind of get to that later because that's where you come into the whole sales aspect. But we have to have a way of determining what is the best issue or the best intervention for the issue. Now, once we kind of look at that, we also have to think about cost-benefit analysis, that, if we're going to, come up with some really costly interventions, is that really, we have to look at, again, it kind of goes back to that acceptable level of risk that we've talked about. This is the cost-benefit. How much can we spend to get how much benefit? And there's some good information about that about cost-benefit analysis. Also on this page, there is I'm going to click it and make sure it is still working. Yes. There's a chapter in a book entitled Healthy and Safe Homes. This is for fire prevention personnel. Excellent description of a program that the CDC did here in Atlanta. And I want you to read that. And as you read through it, it's not very long. As you read through it, identify these different steps that we are going through, where he identifies the people, he identifies the issue, he identifies the process, and the knowledge that's needed. What are the risk factors? Are there risk factors? Age, like for our little grandma type of an example. And he also discusses engineering, enforcement, education, all of those things. So read that chapter. It's a really great example of some good information about a risk reduction plan in action. Our ultimate goal is to come up with that plan. And again, I'm going to put some examples in there if I have not already. Now, I realize this has been kind of long, but I just wanted to walk you through this. Don't get bogged down. If you need to do some outside reference reading, certainly feel like you can. If you look at the website for Vision 2020, strategicfire.org, they have done a lot on this whole concept of risk reduction planning and designing interventions. You may find something there. I'll be happy to look for things as well. Like I said, there's another video on here that's from a previous course. It's probably a year old. So go ahead and watch that. I started watching it and then actually got interrupted and I never got back to it. So it's not quite as long as that, I don't think. But this is where we are, we're as I said, we're beginning to make this progress. And okay, we know about our community. We know about the people in our community. We know the risks, the hazards. So what are we going to do about it? And then in the next unit, we're going to look at how we're going to evaluate our outcomes. In the next unit, we look at high-risk audiences of who, if all things being equal, who generally is at a higher risk of experiencing fire and unintentional injury. So that's just kind of an overview of Module 3, identify and develop intervention strategies. If you need some help, just let me know. And hopefully we'll be able to get a virtual class scheduled really soon so that we can talk about these things. Thanks so much. Sorry this got long, but again, this is some real important pieces. This is kind of the meat of it all. Thanks so much. Have a great day.